Come in, come in. Hi, nice to see you. I've actually managed to get the place slightly tidier than usual, which is nice. Come and have a seat. I don't know if you can glimpse out of the window there, but we're getting a little bit something like spring days, and the garden's looking very fine. And Maggie's planted lovely beds of flowers just in front of my writing hut. And that put me in mind of a poem which I don't think I've shared with you, but I might have done, I suppose. But even if I did, I think it's worth repeating. This is a very nice Oxford anthology called the Oxford Book of Garden Verse. And of course it's unsurprising that a great deal of good poetry has been written about gardens. Gardens are such primal, archetypal, and of course, properly speaking, paradisal things. And of course, in the narrative arc of Scripture, you get the Garden of the Beginnings in Eden, and you get the Garden of Resurrection in John's Gospel, and in some senses, the vision of the city of God at the end is a vision really of a garden city, and the trees along the river that bear leaves for the healing of the nations. So it's very resonant. And I think it's always been something of an ideal for anyone to, particularly if they live in or near a city, to have a garden into which to retire and reflect. And certainly in the Middle Ages and right on into the 16th and 17th century, gardens were particularly associated with periods of calm and reflection. The idea of the garden was to go in and almost enter into a slightly different state of consciousness. And the classic garden poem that expresses that perfectly is by the 17th century poet Andrew Marvell. He's something like 1621 to 1678. So he lives through the crisis of the English Civil War, although in fact he was on the continent during the war itself. But he ended up, he was a man of large, broad mind, but he ended up working for the Commonwealth, for Cromwell's government, though not without privately satirising various aspects of it. But he's now remembered as much. He was known in his day for his satires, but now he's remembered for a collection of lyrics. I mean, the most famous one probably is the Ode to His Coy Mistress, which is a sort of carpe diem, seize the day kind of poem. And, remember, it goes, had we but world enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime. And that also tells you something about him. He's also famous in terms of his structure and technique for using iambic tetrameters rather than pentameters. So the pentameter is the long line with 5 stresses. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Whereas, so you can hear the 5. Whereas Marvell writes these couplets in tetrameters, which have this kind of terse, muscular effect. So, the graves a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. Or, famously from this poem, annihilating all that's made to a green thought in a green shade. Anyway, enough of that as background chat. Let me read you the poem itself, The Garden. It starts with a thing about what folly it is to be in the world of the rat race, and it's about we shouldn't bother with that. We should retire to our gardens and have quiet. And at first it's very languid, kind of simple, unassuming quietness in a garden. But then there comes a point of, I think, what can only be described as mystical experience, an almost out-of-body experience, a kind of ecstasy, a kind of empathy with the greenness of the world, which makes it feel quite contemporary in some ways. So here it is, Andrew Marvell's The Garden. How vainly men themselves amaze to win the palm, the oak or bays, and their uncessant labours see, crowned from some single herb or tree, whose short and narrow verged shade does prudently their toils upbraid, while all the flowers and trees do close to weave the garlands of repose. Fair quiet have I found thee here, and innocence thy sister dear. Mistaken long I sought you then in busy companies of men. Your sacred plants, if here below, only among the plants will grow. Society is all but rude to this delicious solitude. No white nor red was ever seen so amorous as this lovely green. Fond lovers, cruel in their flame, cut in these trees their mistress' name. Alas, little alas, they know or heed how far these beauties hers exceed. Fair trees, wheresoe'er your barks I wound, no name shall but your own be found. When we have run our passion's heat, love hither makes his best retreat. The gods that mortal beauty chase, still in a tree did end their race. Apollo hunted Daphne so, only that she might laurel grow. And Pan did after Syrinx speed, not as a nymph, but for a reed. So there's lovely classical allusions about nymphs turning into trees. And then comes this beautiful encomium of the garden itself. What wondrous life is this I lead? Ripe apples drop about my head. The luscious clusters of the vine upon my mouth do crush their wine. The nectarine and curious peach into my hands themselves do reach. Stumbling on melons as I pass, ensnared with flowers I fall on grass. Meanwhile the mind, from pleasures less, withdraws into its happiness. The mind, that ocean, where each kind does straight its own resemblance find, yet it creates, transcending these, far other worlds and other seas, annihilating all that's made to a green thought in a green shade. Here, at the fountain's sliding foot, or at some fruit tree's mossy root, casting the body's vest aside, my soul into the boughs does glide. There like a bird it sits and sings, then whets and combs its silver wings, and, till prepared for longer flight, waves in its plumes the various light. Such was that happy garden state, while man there walked without a mate. After a place so pure and sweet, what other help could yet be meet? But 'twas beyond a mortal's share to wander solitary there. 2 paradises 'twere in one, to live in paradise alone. How well the skilful gardener drew of flowers and herbs this dial knew, where from above the milder sun does through a fragrant zodiac run. And as it works, the industrious bee computes its time as well as we. How could such sweet and wholesome hours be reckoned but with herbs and flowers? It's wonderful. That last image is one of those ornamental, you get a close cut sort of not gardens where it's in the face shape of a dial and you see the clock going round. But I think the most beautiful verse is the one about that he casts his body's vest aside and that the soul is like a bird in the tree, combing its silver wings. And this gentle allusion to our death and our flight to the true paradise. Whets and combs its silver wings, and, till prepared for longer flight, waves in its plumes the various light. It's all a preparation for that. It's very beautiful. So that's Andrew Marvell's The Garden. You'll find it in lots of anthologies on the web and so on. But this particular one, Garden Verse, should be on every literate gardener's bookshelf. So there you go. Anyway, I'm off for a little post-Easter break now to Blakeney, but glad you were able to catch me in. Cheers.